Okay. What kind of American are you?
Gatekeep. Gaslight. Girl boss. Don't know what these things mean? That's okay. Only one matters for us today, and that's gatekeeping. Don't know what gatekeeping is? That's okay. I'm gonna tell you. Our friend Google, via the dictionary, describes gatekeeping as the activity of controlling and usually limiting general access to something. In media terms, this is like the guy who asks you to name 5 songs by the band you have on your t-shirt, or people who insist that they're real fans of something while other people are not. You really see gatekeepers come out of the woodwork when something that used to be more niche and have kind of like a small fan base or following suddenly explodes and becomes popular, hits the mainstream or whatever. Particularly, gatekeepers get angry because they feel a personal connection to something, which leads to a sense of ownership, and feel like other people only like that thing because it's now popular to do so, not because they actually care about or value said thing in the same way that real fans do. Now, I want to be clear about something like right away. I've been guilty of this. I think we've all been guilty of this in some way. Personally, I think there are a lot of understandable reasons why a person might want to gatekeep something or at least feel ownership over that something. For example, I remember back in the year of 2018 being very frustrated, all of the buzz around a little movie called Black Panther. With the film's release, suddenly everyone and their mom was the biggest Black Panther fan of all time, while weeks before the movie came out, no one had known or cared about who he was at all. I mean, and I wasn't like even a massive Black Panther fan or anything, but I was familiar with him from reading like some comics and stuff, and I was mostly annoyed because all of the new attention brought a ton of useless new controversy, as well as if like Black Panther and his themes hadn't been around for basically decades. But what I also remember being more foolishly bothered by was the sudden new rise in new gatekeeping around the character, and the bizarre sectionalist tendencies audiences had to claim or distance themselves from the character or property. I don't think I have to explain to anyone here why the Black Panther discourse was messy and horrible. Anyone who was there for it remembers the racist backlash, and also like the bizarre and probably made up stories about like white people being denied tickets to the movie and stuff. It was just a whole bunch of useless controversy that diluted the actual achievement and spectacle of the film. But to boil it all down, I think that Black Panther was, for me, a realization that a lot of older comic book fans had probably had like a long time before that, which was that their thing was now everyone's thing. Comics and comic characters weren't secret, nerdy, esoteric pieces of content anymore. They were massive, money-making machines made to be as palatable and enjoyable by as many people as possible. And in so doing, some of the original spirit, or zaniness, was being lost.
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
And to be clear, this is something that happened long before Black Panther. I just think Black Panther really helped show the toxicity of the whole ordeal. For something like comics in particular, I think part of the pushback against this explosion was fear as well. Fans tend to gravitate around properties they find themselves, or at least find acceptance in, whether that be from the content itself or from the community surrounding the content. For a long time, something like comics existed for people who didn't always fit in with the rest of society. This is why so many comic books focus on freaks and losers suddenly becoming heroes. There's an element of wish fulfillment there that, while definitely not exclusive to comics, is nonetheless intrinsic. And while a lot of this is built kind of like off stereotypes, think of Jeff or Comic Book Guy in The Simpsons.
Millhouse, watch me make a loser lose it.
For a long time, there was nonetheless a widely held understanding that comics were for losers and weirdos, and therefore, that was where the losers and weirdos went to be safe and around people who were like them. You have a similar structure in a lot of music communities. Obviously, think of things like punk or rock or emo alt, whatever. And heck, even like bronies and furries have sort of built their entire community around this sense of inclusion for people who aren't really liked or accepted by the wider population. A community I think has a very close overlap to the comic book community in this sense is probably like the Dungeons and Dragons fandom. And I also think this one is important because the early members of this community were literally like seen as witches and evildoers and Satan worshippers and all that crazy shit. And the same goes for like Magic the Gathering fans. And yeah, if you spend a large portion of your life, especially your teenage years, getting harassed and belittled for the things you like, specifically things that you liked because no one let you like anything else, and then suddenly find those same people deciding that they want to like what you like and claiming it as their own when they already have everything else, why wouldn't you be kind of confused and mad and hurt? And yeah, why wouldn't you want to gatekeep?
Spider-Man's best friend.
I think all of this is actually really well epitomized by the character of Eddie Munson in Season 4 of Stranger Things, particularly in his cafeteria speech.
He has to blame something. We're an easy target.
Exactly. We're the freaks because
we like to play a fantasy game.
Eddie and his buddies have built this group and their whole identities around being outsiders and around being looked down on for liking what they like. Eddie's frustration and anger make sense. However, this is also a great example of what makes gatekeeping bad. Sorry to upset you Eddie fans out there, but this character, particularly in his opening scene, is annoying and cringeworthy, and I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be. Why? Because his entire arc on the show, one season of it so far, is dedicated to realizing that one of the preppy normies, Steve, is actually a good person who deserves to be let in, and that he, Eddie, has been engaging in the same sectionalism that has hurt and ostracized him his whole life, leading to him dying in a sacrifice for the people he cares about, which turns out to be everyone in Hawkins. His whole arc is the journey from gatekeeper to, normie. In some of my past videos, I've really railed against media illiteracy and people misunderstanding the content they consume, especially when they consume it in a harmful way. I've thought about it, and in a way, I think that this is a type of gatekeeping. I don't want to come across as saying we need to gatekeep the right way to view or interpret something, because that's not what I'm looking for. But I do think we need to gatekeep in the sense that when we understand something and someone new comes aboard and misunderstands something, we help them out in a way that informs and encourages them rather than humiliates and ostracizes them. That's really the only way to boost media comprehension and media literacy. Like, yeah, I think it's silly and media illiterate of you to wear a Nirvana t-shirt if you've never listened to a single Nirvana song. But maybe instead of bullying those people, we could just recommend a few Nirvana songs instead of laughing at them for not knowing any. I don't know, maybe this is just like the teacher side of the book and movie guide coming out. But I have a lot of students who really like to read things like Colleen Hoover or Sarah J. Maas books, and, well, look, I try to be hip with what the kids are up to. I just finished reading that last ACOTAR book. I've read several Colleen Hoover books, and I'm not gonna lie, I pretty much hate them. However, I don't really insult or denigrate those books or their readers because, hey, at the end of the day, the kids are reading. Would I like them to branch out and read other things? Yes, of course. But I would be bad at my job if I saw these books as anything other than an entry point. The reason so many people hate reading is because high school throws them right into shit like As the Sun Also Rises, which is inaccessible and difficult even for people who already like to read. Letting people, especially kids, read and enjoy schlock is sort of the key to getting them in the door, or through the gates. Instead of making fun of people for what they like, I think it pays to say, well, since you like A Court of Thorns and Roses, you might like A Game of Thrones. Now, maybe they won't. Maybe all they want to read is smut, and that's discouraging, of course, but it's, worth a try. And to be clear, no matter how far back you go, no matter what book or movie you try to use, someone is going to qualify it as not real literature or not real cinema. Somebody's going to gatekeep you every single step of the way. Someone will say, A Song of Ice and Fire, that's not real fantasy. You need to read The Wheel of Time. Then to that, someone else will answer, Jordan and Sanderson, are you 12? You need to read real fantasy, like Lord of the Rings. Then if you go back to the 1940s and 50s, people say, Tolkien, that's nonsense. You need to read real fantasy, like the Chronicles of Narnia. And then at like any point before that, and even after, someone will say, fantasy, you need to read a real genre, like American Abolitionists. Uncle Tom's Cabin is real literature because it's about real issues. And then somebody else in the room will stand up and say, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe, she wasn't even black. She wasn't even a slave. Uncle Tom's Cabin isn't even real. You need to read a real abolitionist text, like Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. And then somebody else is going to argue, what, Douglas? No, you need to read Solomon Northrop. And it'll just keep going on and on and on and on and on and on forever and ever and ever. And the key here is that maybe like we can read all of it. All of that stuff is good. Maybe the more of it we read and enjoy and the more we understand and think. I just feel like anything else creates factionalized groups who stop building their communities around a shared interest in something and instead a shared interest in hating or not liking other people or things that like the same thing. You see this a lot like in the Star Wars fandom, which is just a mess of subgroups slavishly devoted to only loving or hating certain parts of the franchise and denigrating anybody else who likes, well, anything else in the franchise. Here's another example. Let me take you back to the year 2020. I've just joined Reddit. I make one of my first posts ever. It's an r/books. It's a post about The Stand by Stephen King, and I have the misfortune, I make the mistake of using the term underrated masterpiece, which turns out Reddit hates. My overall point is that The Stand, while being as good as, if not better than It or The Shining, has nowhere near the cultural impact or place in the cultural zeitgeist as either. I point out that it doesn't have a reputation as a literate piece of horror either, but is instead either ignored or seen as a bloated Stephen King piece of schlock by the wider literary community. People in the comments make fun of me and call me stupid. People in the comments accuse me of being a teenager who's never read a book before. My post gets reposted in r/book circlejerk and people make fun of me. Ring Stephen King fan. Fellow Redditors call me a dumbass. r/book circlejerk bans me for 69 days when I try to defend myself. I leave Reddit for about a year. I don't understand what I did wrong. Boom! Fast forward 4 years later, and now I'm part of like 6 of these satirical circlejerk subreddits. And that sounds really bad, but basically something like r/book circlejerk is an alt sub to r/books, where the enlightened Redditors repost the stupid Redditors and make fun of their dumb, uneducated normie opinions about the dumb, fake books that they read. Pretty much any major fandom or subreddit is going to have one of these. Some of my personal favorites include r/movie circlejerk, r/sopranos circlejerk, and r/okbuddycoral, which is an offshoot of r/walking dead. Now, to be clear, a lot of these are just kind of like plain mean-spirited in nature. There's no getting around that. Unassuming people make genuine posts in the main subreddits and then unknowingly have their content reposted in the alt subs. Sometimes these people really don't deserve that. I'm not going to pretend that some of the opinions aren't stupid or the comments on them funny. I have a hard time not feeling just a little bit bad for these people after having had it happen to me. Sometimes these people are just new to a group or a fandom or a topic and don't know the buzzwords or culture or other things that will get you made fun of or make you look stupid, even if you're not. But how else are they supposed to learn if they can't be accepted into these spaces or taught about what is or is not a smart question or topic to ask about? There are some exceptions, however. Some people deserve to be made fun of, especially when they're intentionally misreading or misunderstanding work or saying something outright toxic or dangerous. Like, for example, the other day I saw a post in r/movie circlejerk that was a screenshot of someone asking for movies that deal with racial issues without being political, woke, or ahistorical. And then the example they gave was The Last Samurai.
Huh?
This is stupid and deserving of some criticism for a number of reasons. First of all, anything that deals with race issues is basically inherently political, especially if it's related to the United States. Sorry, hate to say it, but it's true. The historical part is fine, but that in conjunction with The Last Samurai is just goofy. And look, no hate to The Last Samurai. Love that one of my favorite Tommy movies. But if you're using that as an example of great historical filmmaking which explores race issues in a way that you find accurate and palatable, well, you might need to have someone explain to you why that's silly goofy, because it's very silly goofy. And also, you might be racist. With that in mind, the issue is still that just reposting that and making fun of it in a secluded alt sub isn't educating that person or helping them. It's just boiling them. The only counter argument to this is that it's not healthy or typically useful trying to change people's minds online, like especially on Reddit, but is making fun of them the solution? I don't know. I mean, probably not, but it makes me laugh. I'm just saying that when we consider fans or normies or whatever, we often get mad because they only know about the low-hanging fruit of movies, books, directors, authors, etc. But when the choice is between low-hanging fruit and starvation, we should be happy that people are taking the low-hanging fruit. Of course, if the low-hanging fruit turns out to be poison, then we're back to square one, but that's a whole different problem. What I enjoy most about gatekeeping subreddits, though, is more so when people create original content that makes fun of misinformed opinions and perpetrators of said opinions, rather than specific people who have sort of been, I guess, brainwashed or just haven't learned yet. When the content is more satirical and less personal, I find it both funnier and more worth actually thinking about. And for all the layers of irony and self-loathing, you can actually typically find some pretty interesting discourse in the comments of some of these zanier subreddits. And I think that what can make them so interesting is that self-awareness and ability to make fun of themselves and make themselves the butt of their own joke that a lot of the main subs are just missing. Something like r/books is a huge group for people who are just casual book fans or just getting into reading, so of course it gets flooded with stupid opinions or repetitive questions. I think the real answer to that, though, is something like r/literature or r/truelit, which are subreddits that are more tightly moderated to keep things kind of fresh and interesting, while something like r/book circlejerk is just straight up useless gatekeeping for comedy. Which if it's for comedy, I guess it's not useless, but you know what I mean. So how, then, did I go from getting reposted in a gatekeeping subreddit to being a member of said subreddits? I don't know. Basically, I think I just kind of matured a little bit, largely due to that incident, and became both more self-aware and culturally aware of what people in the know were going to say about things. And sometimes, yeah, those people in the know are annoying, actually bastards, who are mean just for the sake of making themselves feel better about their attachment to something. They're pretentious gatekeepers, and they suck. Sometimes they got that good comedy, though, so what can you do? But let's simplify here. What exactly is it that makes gatekeeping just straight up bad instead of annoying? Well, basically, gatekeeping is bad because it excludes new fans, and no property can survive without a growing and evolving fan base. Like, just look at something like Star Trek. For a long time, Star Trek was not doing well because all the fans were old, and we weren't bringing anybody new into the community. Fans and content have to change and update with the times. Sometimes that means a long-running franchise will have dips in quality if left in the wrong hands, yeah, but that's life. Gatekeeping is also bad because, let's face it, tends to get pretty racist and misogynist, just the way it is, especially when previously nerdy content explodes onto the normie stage. I mean, just look at how well Star Wars fans have been handling having girls and minorities in their movies, even though the series has always had girls and minorities and been, woke. Not to mention, you can endlessly move the goalposts when it comes to gatekeeping. Or, I guess, move the gates when it comes to gatekeeping. At the end of the day, who really gets to decide who real fans are? Are real Star Wars fans people who hate Disney Star Wars? Are real Star Wars fans people who saw the prequels in theaters? Are they people who have read all the expanded universe stuff? Are they people who have only watched the original trilogy? Are they only people who saw the original trilogy in theaters? What? Where does it begin? Where does it end?
What kind of American are you?
And the same goes for comics. I thought that I was a real comic fan in 2018, but what was I compared to people who had been reading and collecting since the 60s? What were they compared to people reading and collecting in the 1930s? I think it's just an impossible and useless metric to engage with. Who decides, and honestly, who the fuck cares what a real fan looks like? I'm at the point where I don't care. And I understand the worry from gatekeepers. Again, I really do. When a whole new flood of people with a different interest in the content than you join a fan base, it can irrevocably change or alter the direction of that material, and sometimes not always for the better. But you know what? Sometimes we also drift away from the content we love as we grow up and mature. And that's okay. I don't think you should have the same slavish devotion to the same books and movies at 24 as you did at 11. I think that's kind of weird. And unfortunately, a lot of gatekeepers are grown adults who are still obsessed with children's media and get angry when they see said media, catering to children. That's not really healthy, and it's not fair to the new fans either. And I'm not saying that you can't or shouldn't be a lifelong fan of something. That's fine, that's totally cool. I still love a lot of things I loved when I was a kid, but I don't think I look at them the same way. I'm different, and so is the content. That doesn't mean I can't enjoy it or engage with it, and it definitely doesn't mean I have to belittle or bully the new fans. I was a new fan once, and it'd be like belittling or bullying myself. Why would I want to do that? Enough of you guys do that online. We love the movies we love, and engage with the communities we love, because we found ourselves in them. They speak to us, they welcome us, and they accept us. They're more to us than just books or movies. They're a way of looking at the world in a different light, a way of looking at ourselves in a different light. They give us hope, they get us through hard times, they make us laugh, they make us cry, they make us feel human during times other people might have made us feel inhuman. So when a new person wants to join that group, what gives me, or you, or anyone, the right to deny anyone the same things that someone else gave us? Instead of excluding them for their new or novice opinions, why not welcome them? Maybe laugh a little, but then pat them on the back and help them grow. So the next time you see someone wearing a t-shirt with your favorite band on it, don't ask them to name 5 songs. Recommend them 5 songs. It's not about what kind of fan you are. It's about how kind of a fan you are.